Hello guys and welcome back to my channel, and today we are back with another important question on low level designing. And today in this video we will be discussing about the low level system designing of the online food delivery application like Zomato or Swiggy. So in my previous video on the low level system designing, I have covered some of the important topics like flight booking system, hotel booking system and many more. Similarly, here today in this video, I will be covering another important question, and that is online food delivery application. So if you have not gone through those videos until now, I would highly request you to go through that video first and then come back to this video, because over there I have explained you in detail that how you should interact with your interviewer to gather the requirement for a system designing round. And I have also mentioned in detail that what can be the expectation of the interviewer from you during the system design round. So if you have not seen that video till yet, I would highly recommend you to go through those videos first and then come back to this video. So without wasting much time, let's start with this video. So as I have already told you in my earlier video, system designing round is a crucial round for your entire interview process. And in this round, interviewer will ask you to design a particular system without giving a thorough requirement of the system. Means unlike a DSLGO interview, here the interviewer will not give you a proper problem statement. Rather, he will be giving you a vague problem statement like design Zomato or design any food delivery application. And after a thorough round of discussion with the interviewer, you have to get it clear that what aspect or what functionalities of the food booking system he actually meant to say or what you actually have to implement. So let's see how you should interact with your interviewer to get the requirement for creating a low-level system designing for an online food delivery application. So as I have already told you in my previous video, the requirement of a particular system can be of two types. Number one is the functional requirement and number two is the non-functional requirement. So let's see what can be the functional requirement of an online food delivery system. Now before we get down to all the functional and the non-functional requirement of our online food delivery application, let's first go to the Zomato site and let's first try to understand that what can be the functional requirement of a particular system. So here if you can see, this is the Zomato application that we are actually trying to design. So here you can see once I log in into our system, the user will have the provision to search a particular restaurant based on the location. And based on this location, Zomato will list down all the restaurants those are nearby to this location. So here if you see, if I click on the order online, it means that it will list down all the restaurants that are near to my location. So here you can see it is listing down all the restaurants that are within the 5 or 10 kilometer parameters within my locality. And if you go inside a particular restaurant, let's go inside the KFC. So here you can see once I open the restaurant, it lists down all the food menus that it have listed within this KFC restaurant. And here if you look carefully, each and every food item that we have over here have few of the attributes like the price, ratings and some of the description that gives a brief introduction of each and every food items that are listed within our restaurant. Similarly, if I try to book a particular food item from here, I have to select that particular item and I have to go through the process of payment. And once I do the payment, the order will be placed successfully and a delivery agent will be delivering the food item into my house. But since Zomato does not support food ordering from the web view, so I would not able to show you that flow over here. But I hope everyone have ordered some food from Zomato and you already know the exact flow that how things works over here. So without wasting much time over here, let's start designing the low-level system designing of this Zomato application. And let's see what can be the functional and the non-functional requirement for this application. So the first functional requirement for this online food delivery system is the user should be able to log into a system, because without a user signing into our application, we cannot deliver the food. So obviously the first primary requirement should be the user should be able to log in into our system. Now once the user logs into our system, the next thing that comes to our mind is we have to give him the provision of giving his current location so that we can list down all the restaurants nearby to his location. So the next functionality should be user should be able to give location and search restaurant by his location. Now once a user search a particular restaurant based on his location preference, next thing that we have to provide is we have to list down all the food items that are present within that particular restaurant so that he can able to select a particular food item to order. So here the third requirement would be listing all the food items into a particular restaurant. Now once he sees all the food items for a particular restaurant, obviously he would make an order for that item and make a payment. So the next requirement would be ordering a particular or multiple food item, which we will be calling as placing a particular order. And once he makes a particular order, obviously he have to make the payment to make it confirm. So he will be going through a process of payment and he have to make a payment into our system. So the fifth requirement would be make a payment. And once he makes a payment, obviously we have to send him a notification that your order have been booked successfully and it will be delivered soon. So the sixth requirement would be giving a notification to the user. And once the user has been notified, the last and the final thing is we have to give a provision of live tracking of the delivery agent. So the last requirement would be live tracking of the food. But since the live tracking of the food will itself be a complex thing to implement, because we have to give a status of each and every attribute that is happening on the real time, so we will keep this live tracking out of the scope of this online food delivery system as of now. And we will try to focus on the primary attributes or the primary requirements of this application, that is these 6 points. So let's focus on this 6 point and let's build our low-level object-oriented designing for this requirement. Now since we have got the functional requirement of our system, let's also see what can be the non-functional requirement of our system. So as I have already told you, the non-functional requirement of all the low-level designing will be more or less similar. That is, the system should be scalable, available, maintainable, and the code should be modular enough so that you can easily change the particular code in the future without creating a major impact into your system. So let's list down all those non-functional requirements over here. Now always remember, when you are implementing a low-level system designing, you should not be focusing on the non-functional requirement, because the non-functional requirements mostly come on the high-level system designing, where you have to explain in detail that how you want to scale a particular application based on the user traffic and all those things. Means how you want to distribute your data into various databases, how you want to scale it using vertical and the horizontal scaling and all those things. But since here we are dealing with the low-level system designing, so we do not have to concentrate on this point. Rather, we will be discussing on the object-oriented designing of this application. So now here, since we have already got the requirement, that is the functional as well as the non-functional requirement for this application, let's now see, based on this total requirement that we have got right now, how easily we can do a system designing for this online food delivery application. So the first thing first, before we start with the low-level system designing of the application, we have to first identify the actors of this application. So if you look carefully over here, the Zomato application can be grouped into two subdivisions. One is the user, that is the customer who is actually placing a food order into our system, and number two, the operator or the restaurant owners who are actually making the inventory of this Zomato application. Means what are the food items that are available on their restaurant, what are the metadata of the restaurant, what are the description of the food item, and all these things. So here if you see, this Zomato app can be segregated into two broader aspects. One is the customer, who is the core of the business, and number two is the operator, that is the restaurant owner. So there are two primary actors of this application, and those two are the restaurant owner and the customer. So let's list down those two over here. So here you can see we have already identified the main actors of our application. Now let's do the main thing, that is we have to find out the main attribute or the main entity that we need to build for this system. Let's see what I mean to say by the entity. So here if you see, if we go to the Zomato application, the first and the primary entity will be the user or the customer. So basically a customer will be of type user, who will be having few of the attributes like name, the address of the customer, the phone number, and so on. So here you can see we will be having the first entity, and that is the customer, that is the user entity. So let's list down all the main entities that we can see here in our Zomato application. So the first and the primary entity is the user entity. So let's create an entity called as user, which is nothing but an account which will hold all the metadata of a particular user. Now once a user buy a particular item, then he becomes the customer for Zomato, and for that we will be having another entity, that is the customer entity, which will have some of the definition like what are the orders for that particular customer and so on. So there will be one more entity here, and that will be the customer entity. Now the next important entity that you can see in our Zomato app is the restaurant entity, because here if you see, if I go to the search bar and try to search a particular food item or particular restaurant, the heart of this application is the restaurant over here, and each and every restaurant will have a food items associated over here. So here if you see, we have identified two more important entities over here. Those are number one is the restaurant and number two the food items. Now once we display a particular food items, you know the user have to select a particular food, and thus that food will go into his cart. So the next main entity will be of type cart, which will hold the list of all the food items that he want to book. And once he is finalized with the cart, the next thing is like he want to make a payment to confirm his booking. So obviously there will be another important entity, and that is payment. And once he have made a payment, that cart will get converted into order, which will have all the attribute like what are the food items he have ordered, what is the present status of the order, whether the food has been confirmed or not, whether the payment is successful or not, and all these things. So here we will be having one more important entity, and that is orders. And once we got the order, we have to notify the user that your order has been placed successfully. So here we will be having one more entity, and that is our notification system. So here you can see how granularly we have identified all the main entities into our application. Now here, since we have identified all the main or the primary entities for our application, let's now drill down a bit and let's see how these different entities will be interacting with each other and how we will do the class diagram for each and every entities over here. So let's start with the actual low-level designing of our food delivery application. And let's start with the first and the primary entity of our application, that is the code of our application, that is the restaurant class. So here we will first design the restaurant attribute first, and then we will focus on the customer aspect. So let's start with describing the first entity class, and that is the restaurant entity. So we'll create a class called as restaurant. Now if you just look carefully, a particular restaurant will have few of the attributes. Let's first identify those attributes. The first attribute will be the name of the restaurant, followed by the cuisine it delivers. Third will be the location. Fourth will be the timing, phone number, and so on. So let's first list down all those attributes here within this restaurant class. And in this way, during your interview, you also have to elaborate each and every entity into your system designing, and you have to tell the interviewer that how each and every entity will be communicating with the other entity and how this entire system will communicate with each other. So let's start with defining the attribute for the restaurant class. So the first attribute will be the name of the restaurant. Next will be the description or a short bio for a particular restaurant. So I will call it as description. Now the next important thing is the address of a particular restaurant. So let's create an entity called as address, which will hold the complete address like pin code, latitude, longitude, and so on. Now the next thing is like a restaurant can have a rating which will be of type float or double. So here I will define an attribute called as rating, followed by there can be other attribute like time, when it opens, and all those things. So you can add it accordingly as discussed with your interviewer. but I will keep it as of now. Now the main attribute that we have to add over here is the menu class. So here you can see a particular restaurant will have a list of menu within the restaurant. So we'll create an entity called as menu, which will hold all the list of food items on a particular restaurant. So here if you see, these are primarily the main attribute of our restaurant class. Now see what are the functionality that we need to implement over here on this restaurant class. So if you just think, a restaurant owner or the operator who is the actor for this class will obviously like to update the restaurant details, will also like to update the food menu and so on. So we will give him the provision of doing all those functionality over here. So here we will be mentioning few of the functionality like update restaurant info as well as update menu. Here if you want, you can also send the parameter that we need to deliver into this function like the type menu. So if you see, these are primarily the main basic attribute that we need to have into our restaurant class. Now if you see, once we were defining this restaurant entity, we have also identified few of the other entity within this class, and those are the address entity and the menu entity. So let's understand that what can be the detailed implementation of those two entity classes. So let's first go into the address entity. So we'll create a class called as address, and this address entity will have few of the attributes like the main address followed by the pin code and the latitude and the longitude of the location, so that we can uniquely identify a particular restaurant based on the particular location. So we'll also add those attributes over here. And that's it. So this will be our attribute for our address entity. Now let's see what can be the attribute for this menu entity. So let's create the class called as menu. Now if you look carefully, a particular menu means a list of food items. So here this class will consist of a list of all the food items present in a particular restaurant. So here we will create a class called as menu, and within this menu class we will be using a Java list to define all the food items that are available within this menu item. So what we'll do, we will first define a list, and this list will consist of all the food items present within this menu. I think this is clear to you that why we are creating a list of food items rather than specifying a particular food item into the menu, because a menu can have a whole list of hundreds to thousands of menus present in a particular restaurant. So here we will be using the property of a list. So here you can see we have identified another important entity for our restaurant class, and that is the menu. So here we have completed the flow for our restaurant. Now another important entity that we have to define is the food item, which defines all the attribute of a particular food, means what can be the rating of a food, what is the description of the food, and so on. So let's define this new entity called as food item. And as discussed, here we will be having few of the property like the name of the food, the description of the food, the rating means how the food has been rated, and also the price of a particular food. So these are the main attribute of the food item. Now hopefully you have understood the flow, how we have to design this low level architecture, means from a particular parent entity, how modularly we have to define each and every entity and how we have to make a connection among each other. Now you can see we are almost done with the restaurant aspect of our food delivery system. Now let's go to the next aspect, and that is the customer aspect. Means we have to define all the customer attributes, what are the order he have made, and so on. So let's start with defining the first entity that we have identified, and that is the user entity. So let's first create the entity called as user. And if you have understood, a particular user can have a lot of entities and attributes associated with him. For example, he can have a name, an address, a pin code, email ID, password, and so on. So let's define all those attributes in this user class. So here you can see we have identified successfully all the attribute of the user class. So here you can see we have also identified that there will be one address entity over here. And this address entity we have already defined it over here while defining the address of the restaurant. So we can use this class over here also. So we'll skip this one. Now the next thing is like once a user logs into your application, he is basically a user. And we are collecting this data from that particular user. But once he makes an order into our application, he becomes a customer. So we also need the customer details for a particular user. So let's define another important entity for our online food delivery system, and that is the customer entity. So let's create a class called as customer. And as I have already told you, all customer are basically user. So here we will be using the same attribute, and that is the user attribute, where we will get all the entities of this user attribute from here. Now the next thing that we have to find out that what can be the other important aspect of this customer entity. So if you just think carefully, once a user comes to our application and becomes a customer, obviously he have previously made some order. So we have to list down all the previous order that he have done in the past. So we will make a list of orders that he have already done in the past as well as he is making in the present. So here we will be again having an attribute called as orders, which will be a list because a customer can have multiple orders in the past. So it will be a list of orders. Hopefully you have understood it. Now the next thing, since we have identified all this attribute for the customer class, let's also identify what are the functional requirements that a customer might need. So the first functional requirement that a customer might need is he want to update his profile info. Maybe he want to change his phone number or password or so on. So we will add a functionality called as update info that will update the customer details. The next important thing is a customer will obviously place an order into our application. So there will be another important functionality called as place order. And this place order functionality will take one parameter as input, and that is the order attribute, which will consist of the entire order details for a particular order. So these are primarily all the main functionality of this customer class. Now let's see what can be the other main attribute of this entire system. So one thing I have forgot to add over here within this customer class is like there will be another field that is the important field, and that is a particular cart. Means once a customer add a particular food, it will obviously get added into a particular cart, and from that cart it will get processed as an order. But here we have to define an attribute called as cart. So let's understand that what this cart and orders and all this entity class will have in them. So let's first define this cart class over here. So we'll create a class called as cart. And here if you understand it correctly, a particular cart will be having a particular cart unique ID. So here we will be assigning a ID to each and every cart, because obviously my cart unique ID will not be similar to your cart unique ID, because otherwise we cannot uniquely identify a particular cart. So here we will be having a cart, and this cart will also have the list of food item that I want to order. So here I will be having a list of food item that I want to order. But these food item details will be different than the food item that we have in the restaurant. Let me tell you why. But let's first list down the food item details over here. So here you can see we have identified the cart attribute over here. Now let's see how this food item details will be different than this food item. So here if you see, this food item detail class will have some unique identifier. Means here actually we will be having the item that is the food item. Means which food he is actually ordering and at what quantity. So here you can see there will be another attribute called as quantity, as well as here we will be having another attribute that is the restaurant from where he is ordering this food item. So here you can see we will be having another attribute called as restaurant. So hopefully you have understood it. So here you can see for a particular cart we are having a cart ID, and a cart ID will have the list of food item details that he want to order. And these food item details will have the list of the food which he want to order. Means for example, this is chicken biryani, quantity as 1 from a particular ABC restaurant. So obviously this is more granular information that we need for making a particular order. So here this will be the entity that we need for this cart class. Now since we have already identified the user, customer and the cart over here, now the final and the main thing that we have to do, we have to design the order class. So let's start with designing the order class, which will obviously have an order ID, the date of the order, the timestamp, the payment, the card details, and so on. So let's list down all those attributes over here. So here you can see we have identified all the order attributes. Here you can see a particular order will have an order ID, an order date, time, the cart ID obviously from where it got converted to an order, the status of the order, and so on. So there can be plenty more information that you want to give within this order ID, and this whole list of order will basically go as a notification to the user. So this will be basically the data what notification server will be getting ingested. So here we will be having another main entity, and that is the notification server. And as you know, since the notification server is a big attribute to define over here, I will skip that part over here. But hopefully you have understood that how this entire system is interacting with each other. Now let's define the heart of our application, and that is the food order management system. So if you see over here, though we have defined and identified all the classes over here, but all of them are scattered here and there. Here you can see this is a restaurant class and this is a user class, but both of them are segregated from each other. Let's see how we will be incorporating everything together and how each and everything will interact with each other. So let's define the final and the last class of our function, that is the food management system. And since this food management system is the main function or the main heart of our application, obviously this class should have all the information that we have listed down over here. So let's see what can be the attribute of this food ordering management system. So the first thing is like this food ordering management system should have the list of all the restaurants that are enrolled within his system. So there will be an array list of all the restaurants that are present within our system. Also here we will be having the list of all the customers that we have enrolled in our system. Also we can have all the list of users we have in our system, and so on. Now the next important thing is we have to implement the functionality that we have defined in our requirement. Means the user should be able to log in into our application. So here there will be a functionality called as sign up or sign in, which will take this user class as our attribute and help to sign a particular user into our application. Now the next thing is like a user should be able to search a restaurant by a particular location. So here we have to give a provision for the user to search a restaurant by a location. So here we will be having a hash map which will be having a key value pair which will be location and the restaurant. So here you can see with the help of this hash map, a user can simply search all the restaurants that are listed on a particular location. So let's define a function called as search restaurant by location. And here we will be passing the address as an attribute. So hopefully that makes sense. So here you can see what will happen is like a user will try to go into our application and will try to give a particular address where he want to search for the restaurant, and based on the address that we are passing over here, our system will go through this hash map and list down all the restaurants that are available within the 5 kilometer parameter. So this logic will be defined within this search restaurant by location functionality. Now the next functionality is like we have to list down all the restaurant, order a particular food, make the payment, and all these things. So all these things will be a simple functionality that we need to call over here. So let's define all those functions one by one. So here you can see we have defined all the main functionality that we need to define within this food management system, which is the core or the heart of our application. So I hope you guys have thoroughly understood that how we have identified each and every attribute over here, and here how each and every entity class is interacting with each other and making a complete system as a whole. Now since we have designed and defined almost all the functionality that we have discussed at the very initial stage, now let's also identify the actors with each and every entity over here. So here if you see, this part of our application, that is the restaurant management system, will be handled by our actor, that is the operator or the restaurant owner. and this part of the system, that is the ordering of the food and all these things, will be handled by our actor, and that is the customer. So here we will be defining our actor, that is customer. So I hope you guys have thoroughly understood the video, and if you have any doubt, feel free to let me know in the comment section below. Obviously it might can happen that I have missed some of the points to implement. I hope which you can obviously discuss with your interviewer and you can design it accordingly, because I hope you have already understood the main fundamental that how we design a low level implementation of a particular application. So I hope you guys have thoroughly understood this video, and if you have found this video useful, do not forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and if you are new to my channel, do not forget to hit the bell icon so that you will get notified once I upload my next video on low level designing. So see you on my next video. Thank you.